Hey there, amazing listeners. Welcome to Family, Business, and Beyond. I'm Debra Kane, and if you're a mom trying to juggle everything from diaper changes to business meetings, or someone just looking for a bit of joy and inspiration, you've found your new favorite podcast. Here, we talk about everything from launching your dream business to finding joys in family chaos, all while having a few laughs along the way. Each episode is packed with real stories, practical tips, lots of science, and a sprinkle of the unexpected to keep you hooked from start to finish. Ready to transform your life and have some fun? Let's get started. Our next guest is Kelly Hutcheson. Kelly has a master's in child counseling. She's a certified life coach, a behavior specialist, a teacher, and a parent of two. She's dedicated to positivity and living her best life each and every day without coasting. She has overcome people-pleasing, perfectionism, and caring what others think to live her most authentic life, and she loves to teach others how to do the same. Her unwavering passion lies in empowering parents to forge deeper connections with their children, getting them to listen without yelling. With her expertise, you can restore the harmony in your home forever. Kelly, welcome.
What an intro. Wow. Thank you.
You are very welcome. I'm so excited to have you here. Nobody knows this about our relationship. We don't really know each other in person, but online we do for a couple of years now.
I know.
But
It's
this is the first
crazy.
time we're meeting. Yeah.
It's wild.
So
I feel like I know you so well.
I know. It's so funny. It's so funny the way that happens online. But so we have a lot to talk about, and I'd love to just jump right in. Can you give us a quick overview of what conscious parenting is?
Yes, I would love to. So when I started my conscious parenting journey, I didn't even know what conscious parenting was. I was a teacher and a counselor in the schools for almost 20 years. And so I thought I was going to have a leg up on parenting, not leg up on anybody else, but I thought it was going to be a little bit easier for us because I had so much experience working with really little kids and very severe behavior problems. So I thought, and it took us a long time to get pregnant. So I thought our struggle is in getting pregnant. But once we're pregnant, I think we're going to be pretty well versed in this area because of all of my experience, all the books, master's degree, all the things. And then I had my own too. And I was someone I didn't even recognize. For 5 years, I call myself like the smoker's mouth mom. I was the pointy lip mom. But yeah, the wrinkles because of all the holding the cigarettes. I was such a terse, stressed, nappy parent. But in the schools, I was sweet. I was lovable. I was like a strong leader in the classroom. I could get my kids to go very far and take them very far academically, emotional. I focused on a lot of emotional growth. Their behavior was in check. If they came to me with a lot of behavior problems, by a month in or months in, all of a sudden we're jiving and their behaviors are just dissipated. And then at home, I was a crazy lady. And I couldn't figure it out because I thought I need to try a different strategy. And after almost 20 years of working in the schools, I had strategies, I had charts, I had books, I had read it all. And I didn't know what the problem was. So of course it wasn't me. It had to be the kid. So I was like, it has to be my daughter, it has to be my son, it has to be them. Maybe it's my husband. It couldn't be me because I had all this experience. And then I read the book, The Conscious Parenting by Dr. Shefali, and my entire world was like turned on a dime because I realized that we come to parenting with such a big ego, and the ego is what gets in our way. And I didn't even know what an ego was. I always thought ego was someone who thought they were too hot to trot and they were on Wall Street with the Rolex. But it's actually the exact opposite. I was coming from such extreme lack in my parenting journey that I was so afraid of messing it up that I was parenting from that fear-based place. And that's where I was messing it up. And in the schools, I had no ego with those students because they belonged to Bobby and Susie. And if I had a problem with the child, I would bring in Bobby and Susie. We'd have interventions. We'd work together. But if there was a problem at home, then it was a reflection of me and my badness and my bad parenting. But I didn't see them as a reflection of coming from God and a reflection of someone else that came through me, but didn't come from me. And I took all their behaviors and made it all about me because my ego was just roaring. Where in the schools, I didn't make their behavior mean anything about me as a teacher or counselor.
that makes perfect sense. So many of us do that. It's hard for me to imagine you the way you described in the beginning.
Yeah.
And anybody who knows you online, even, it must be the
Hmm.
same for them. It must be like, I don't, it's hard to believe that you ever did that. But what is amazing is when I hear you say that your kids, I know I've heard you say this, I don't remember when, that your kids look at you like you've asked them, what would you do if I yelled at you? And their response was like, why would you ever do that? And I was like,
Yeah.
I would love if my kids ever said that to me. You know,
I work
I
with so
have
many
to admit,
parents. Yeah, I work with so many parents and I hear over and over, I love these children with more than my every fiber in my being. And then I yell at them all day long and I feel so much immense guilt. I go to sleep with the mommy guilt and I wake up the next morning and I promise not to do it again, only to be doing it all over again. And I was in that same crazy cycle. And it wasn't so much the yelling and screaming, but I was snappy. I was passive aggressive. I was like, what's the matter now? I was very sarcastic. I would, with my husband, I would joke, oh, he or she's crying because the sun is shining. We just were so terse and annoyed a lot. And I didn't realize my energy was coming across that way because I was convinced there was something wrong with them. So then I would find evidence that something was wrong with them, whether they had social anxiety, ADD, whatever it was. I was looking for evidence and I would send it to my husband. I'm like, see, they have this. And I would send him the ailment of the week. And then he'd write back, and what's your point? This is the child that we've been given, is what he was saying. He didn't know that he was saying that, but he's like, so now what? And I was like, we need to try a different strategy. And it was just that constant exhaustion of walking on eggshells because I was so afraid every time they cried or got upset or had a big emotion. I took that as a reflection that there was something wrong with me versus they didn't know what to do with that big emotion, which is what I taught in the schools. So it was like crazy making for me. But once I learned about the ego, I was like, oh, all my infertility journey stuff is coming up for me right now. And that's where this place of lack was coming from. And that's why I was parenting from such a terse place. Because I was like, I need you to behave and be emotionally mature so then you can make me feel like a good mom. It was all about me. And that's what the ego does. The ego just roars its ugly head and just shoves all your insecurities and all your past pain and all your past trauma. And it just gets all regurgitated onto our kids if we're not conscious about it. And that's what consciousness is, being conscious about where our triggers are, where our insecurities are, where our traumas are, where our past pain is, and not dumping that all over these little 3-year-olds or 5-year-olds, or now they're almost 13 and 15 and almost 16. So it's crazy, the journey. And my kids don't even remember that former self, but I remember it. And I remember how much I was struggling. So then I was like, I feel like I have found the Willy Wonka ticket and I have to share this with everybody. And I've been sharing it ever since probably 2013, 2014. And it never gets old because it's the same problem day in and day out. And it's the same solution. Because a lot of times we say, he's doing this, she's doing this, she's doing this. So I tried this. And those are just all symptoms. And I always use the analogy of, if I am having a rash and it's from something that I'm eating, and I'm just constantly treating the rash with the cream, but I'm not looking to see what I'm eating that's causing the rash. That's why it feels like we're on this crazy cycle, because we're not looking at within of what's causing the rash versus just treating it always topically.
Exactly. And I will say, I do parenting coaching now also, along with entrepreneurship, like startups for moms who want to do that. And as I definitely have learned a thing or two from you. I don't follow one method. There's conscious parenting, gentle parenting, attachment parenting. There's a lot. And they all have some similarities, but they all have differences too.
Mhm.
I'm big on modifying things to make them fit into your life so that they become a habit and it works for you. Do you know of scientific research that points specifically to conscious parenting methods as being helpful for child development, for whatever?
A lot of times when our kids are having their big emotion, their nervous system is on high alert and they don't know how to calm themselves down. So we tell them just to calm down, it will help them and then we'll fix it and they will calm down. But they don't know, because their brains are not developed, how to calm down. So we have to do something that's called co-regulation, where we have to come in with that calm energy, detach our ego and see our child as having a hard time versus giving us a hard time, which is what the ego wants to tell us. And so when we come in and we regulate, like, oh, you're having a human emotion, this is completely normal. Nothing has gone wrong. If you were to call me and or you were to call me and you were upset about your day, and I'm not going to be like, get over it, it's not that big of a deal, everyone has bad days. I'm going to be like, oh my goodness, I've been there too. I know how that feels. That's so tough. And this is what helped me. And when I've and you're in a calmer state, this is what helped me. So that's what we have to do with our kids, is detaching the ego and realize that they're having a hard time versus giving us a hard time. And then we co-regulate together. I always use the analogy about if we're ever on a plane and there's lots of turbulence, the first thing we do is we look to the flight attendant to make sure he or she has that calm, assertive energy. Everything's cool. This is completely expected. Don't freak out. But if we look over and the flight attendant's freaking out, then we're going to start to panic and make the phone calls. And oh my gosh, this is bad. This is bad. This is bad. So the kids do the same thing when they're having that big emotion. They look to us like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Is this okay? Is this normal? And then if we're freaking out too, then it just heightens it up. And then we're both in our nervous system and we're just on high alert, both of us. But we're never actually teaching them what to do when they get to, and I don't even call them negative emotions. I just call them tricky emotions. Because when these tricky emotions come up and we're in our 30s, 40s, and 50s, and we already know that this is part of the human experience. So the more that we can normalize that for our kids when they're younger, the less they're afraid of it. And what happens over time is it happens with less frequency, less intensity, and less duration. But the goal is to never have a child that doesn't feel a tricky emotion. The goal is to allow the child to know that this is part of the human experience. So then they're not learning to stuff and hide their tricky emotions. Because when they're 25, 35, 45, and they have these tricky emotions come up, instead of smoking them away, hiding them away, sleeping them away, drinking them away, they're gonna be like, oh, this is part of the human experience. I've done this for so many times, so I'm just gonna do this again. And that's what happens is we're not teaching kids emotional literacy. And so when they're older, they don't know how to have that literacy, emotional literacy as an adult. If we're teaching a child how to read in first grade, which is my favorite thing to do, we teach them lots of strategies of what to do when you get to a word you don't know. You could chunk it. You could sound it out. You could use picture clues. You could use author's context. So we teach them all these strategies of what to do when you get to a word you don't know. But we never do that with emotions. We never teach our kids, what do you do when you get to emotion you don't know how to do? And sounding it out doesn't always work. So we have to stack those strategies. And that's what we teach our kids. So then when they're having these tricky emotions come up, they're building in that resiliency that nothing has gone wrong. And then they have a pool of strategies to pull from, just like when they're reading, they have a tool belt, so to speak, of strategies of what to do when they get to an emotion they don't know what to do with.
Yes. And I'll tell you, I see that I do a lot of volunteering at the elementary school
Mhm.
near me, and I do some of my coaching there. But I have noticed a lot of little kids, like I'm saying second, third, and
Mhm.
fourth grade, even first graders, to be honest with you, but you can tell that they're holding back. They're
Mhm.
trying to say something. The ones, especially the older ones, know what they're feeling. They have a grasp and they're trying to say it, but they're holding back. Like they don't know if they should tell you, or they don't know if they
Mhm.
should answer it. They used to have or not during, but after COVID or towards
Mhm.
the end of COVID, they had SEL in the schools. They probably had
Mhm.
it in yours too. And they only did that for 1.5 years or something like that, and then they said there's no more money for it. The whole thing about SEL that I know of is that it shouldn't be a separate class anyway, and I
Mhm.
see the best teachers actually incorporating those techniques within what they do anyway, but you have
Right.
to really be an experienced teacher to do that because it does take some effort, but they do, and I feel like that's what's lacking in a lot of kids because I went off on the side, but today there's so much more ADHD and different neurodivergencies being diagnosed,
Mhm.
overdiagnosed, misdiagnosed, whatever. And I have to believe that it has more to do with the way kids see things. The world is so different today, and
Mhm.
the pace. What do you think about everybody has commented on the fast pace of transitioning from one subject to another, even the low grades. It's hard when they're learning and they're used to asking questions and then they are like, okay, we have to stop now. It just doesn't seem like a logical way to learn things. I don't know. What do you think about so much more ADHD? I know you don't teach today in the schools, right? You don't do that, but you
I don't teach
still,
in the schools. I see the onslaught of it. I think has a lot to do with screens because what I teach parents is when they're on the screens, they don't have to have that interactive piece. It's a very passive piece for kids to be. And I'm not anti-screens whatsoever. I'm
Mhm.
just more of a balanced approach of, especially the younger, with the littler they are, the more we want to teach them that patience and to be able to wait in line, the little things, because when they're on their screens, they don't have to do anything other than being passive. So then when they get to school, they have to be interactive and they have to do that taking turns and listening, and they're so used to that overstimulation And that passive motion or the passive energy, that part of the brain of taking turns and waiting and processing information and that interactive piece is completely missing when they're on screens for 6, 8, 10 hours a day, because it's a great babysitter. But when they get to school, they don't have that and they don't know how to be that. So that part of the brain, that interactive piece and that waiting piece and that taking turns piece isn't there. So that's where the impulsivity comes. They're bored. So they just check out. And the teacher has to work so hard to almost act like a clown on stage to keep their brains engaged in the lesson. So the kids will either just tune them out and they'll have the zoning out that you see that they do with the screens, or they'll do the active piece where they're acting out. And they're just, the silly billies and they're just can't sit still and they're just all over the place because they've never been taught how to be bored, how to wait, because it's very uncomfortable to see our kids uncomfortable. And so we just give them a device to calm them down, and they're in strollers and they're at tables. And so they're not ever given that chance to practice that. So then they're put in the school system where they have to sit and listen. And I think schools should be definitely interactive. But in the times where they have to listen to a story or they have to listen to a math lesson and then apply what they learn, that's very hard to do when they're not practicing it outside of school. So I think that's a huge thing that parents can help to minimize that for kids, to teach them and activate that part of the brain. That's why I say board games are great, puzzles with your kids and doing it with them, because you won't believe, like when kids would come to my office as a counselor, I didn't lay them on the couch in first grade and be like, tell me all your problems. What's going on at home? What's your friendship issues? I just would color with them. I would do puzzles with them. I would play a game with them, a board game. And the stuff would just come out naturally because they're so stressed out about that thing. So then it's on the top of their mind, just like we all have stresses in our life. So someone says, how you doing? You're like, blah, 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 and you just let it all out. And that's what kids do. And so they need that place and that safe place where the parents aren't going to judge them. They're not going to try to fix it. They're not going to say, well, you need to tell the teacher that this is happening and you need to make sure that you're not sitting alone at lunch and you need to make sure that and then micromanaging, and they just want to be heard. They want to be seen. They just want to know, like, I know. And you can be like, I know what that's like to not have anybody sit with at lunch. I know what it's like when the math is too hard and the teacher just keeps going, and that you build so much connection during something hard that they're going through because you've been through that too. And it might not be that exact example, but you've definitely felt that emotion. So you're connecting with them on the emotional level, and then you'll see that their walls start to drop and they're not feeling so much judgment and like criticalness from us because we just want to fix it. We want to make it better because we can't see them uncomfortable versus leaning into the discomfort. Oh, that must be hard. I know how that feels. And that's so comforting for kids to hear that this is a safe place. My first day of teaching every single year, I would say boys and girls, and I would talk in a voice like this. My name is Miss Stout, or my name is Miss Hutcheson. Before I got married, I would say Miss Stout. And I just want to know that I'm a very nice teacher and I'll never yell at you. And you could hear a collective sigh in the classroom of just, oh, I can. And that is how people would say, how do you get their reading levels? How do you get their writing levels? How do you get their math levels so high and take them from knowing 2 words and reading chapter books by the end of the year? They're like, what's your curriculum? I'm like, it has nothing to do with the books. It has to do with they feel safe. Their walls are down. They don't feel like they're in fight or flight, because some kids will fight back and their behavior will become super strong and crazy. And then other kids will be like super passive and just fall down and don't make her mad is what they tell themselves. So then they just become super passive. And I don't know about you, but I don't want any of those kids in my class, a super passive or a super aggressive kid. And we can give that same gift to our kids at home when they know that mom is a safe spot, dad is a safe spot. And then their walls will come down and you'll hear so much vulnerability, because vulnerability breeds vulnerability. So the less walls that we have, the more that they know it's safe to come out and to share that stuff that happens at school. And when they don't share it either, they just know that you're a safe spot, whether they're processing it on their own or they want to share it. They just know that it's a safe place and it's a safe haven at home. Because so many kids come from stressful homes and then they bring that stress to school. But they're going to deal with enough stress outside my 4 walls. So I want to make these 4 walls as stress-free and low wall love, I call it, as much as possible. And I'm in charge of that in my 4 walls. And then when they go out into the world, they'll use this as a blueprint of what healthy, non-toxic love feels like. So then they're drawing that into their life in their adult relationships and their young adult relationships, in their friendships. If they're with a teacher that's nasty and rude or yelling, or a coach, or another parent if they go to someone's house, they'll know that this does not feel right. This is not good. And this is something I need to report. But if they're being yelled at all the time at home, And then they have a coach outside of our ears that's yelling and screaming or name calling or calling them outside their name or F-bombing them, which happens, especially as they get older. The egos start getting bigger and stronger with coaches. I want them to know that is not okay and it's not a normal thing for them. And then when they're drawn to their young adult relationships or their friendships, I want them to seek out those non-toxic and healthy loves based on what feels familiar to them. Because if you've ever had a friend who's been in a relationship, you're like, why is she still with him? Or why is he still with her? He treats her horrible, or she treats him horrible, or he yells, or he hits, or he drinks too much. The reason why they stay is because that feels familiar. And we want to set a blueprint that they go out and repeat that and they recreate what their four walls is and they go recreate it in their young adult relationships. So when it doesn't match up with their blueprint, then they exit stage left versus this feels familiar. And that's the huge goal I try to help parents see. That this isn't just about right now and the sippy cup. This is much bigger than all of us.
Right. And I think most parents will admit that they want that for their children. They want, of course, they want everything to be better than what they had, even if they had a great childhood. They still want more for their kids. What you were saying was so important. Everybody knows modeling is the best teacher, right? So what they see is what they're going to do. It doesn't matter what you say to them. If you're doing something different, that's what they're going to learn. And parents may know that. They don't always take it to heart. They don't always think it's as important. I still have today, I said this before, I am very surprised because I'm older. My kids are grown. I go to the school volunteering with my grandkids. And yeah, and I love it. I just love it.
Yeah.
I was a preschool teacher, so I love that atmosphere. But that being said, when I do this, I'm talking to younger moms, right? All the time. And I am always shocked at how the biggest percentage, much more than I ever thought, of these moms are not as aware as I thought. Like I'm thinking, they think, I feel like they're thinking of like things in a past generation, the way they're not everybody, but a bigger percentage than I thought. I want to say, if I had to guess, I would put it at maybe 65%. And I feel like that's a high percentage of parents that are not being open and aware of what's best for your kids today in today's world and the way things are, and still using techniques that are way outdated and saying things that my grandparents might have said. I'm shocked at that. So getting the word out to more and more parents to just want to learn more. I know everybody's busy, but it doesn't take a lot of time to research something and learn, and then you do it little by little. And when it's for your kids, when you know that it's going to be better for them in the future, I don't know anybody who wouldn't want to do that.
Right.
It just makes sense to me. What do you think? So all of that being said, you talked a little bit about self-regulation, which is part of executive function.
Do you think that neurodivergent diagnosis like ADHD or being overdiagnosed due in part because of the overwhelm of today's world and also lacking many executive function skills?
I find that like parents, and I was in this ballpark too, so I'm not casting any judgment. I think we spend so much like planning for the wedding, but we're not actually planning for the marriage, like the wedding, the plan. And so what I was spending all my time is getting pregnant. It took us 6 years to get pregnant. We finally got pregnant. It was like, okay, now we're pregnant. Now let's keep going. It's like this destination addiction of let's get pregnant. We finally got pregnant. Let's have the baby. So we're never like in this current moment. And so I spent 5 years of not really enjoying parenting because I was so snappy and I was so terse and I was worried about messing it up because I had to be the perfect parent because we worked so hard to be this parent. And so a lot of times parents have this destination addiction and they are using external factors to measure how they're doing as a parent. And it could be the grades, it could be the sports, it could be the behavior, it could be the emotions. And when those things aren't coming up the way that we think it should, a lot of times the screen is an easy thing to put in front of them or let them check out and let them veg out. But then there's never that time for connection with the parent. And with the way that we connect with our kids, number one is going to be different at every single age. And number two, it's not on the kids' terms, but it's on the kids' terms as far as if you want them to open up and feel like this is a safe spot. And this is someone who has my back and not someone who's going to be always on my back. And so if we see them as a child that we're having a relationship with versus I'm in charge, I'm the boss, we're doing this with each other versus me on top of each other. And you do this and you do this. We're never spending that time in connection. And it could be a board game, or it could be just going to get the mail. Or Grady and I do this silly thing where we do the trust fall in the pool. It takes 20 seconds, but I hold his arms out and he leans back and I always hold on to him. And it's so silly, but it's just a way that just a little thing that we do. Lily, if I asked my daughter to do that, she'd be like, "You're crazy." But that's just something that happened organically because we're out walking the dogs or playing with the dogs. But I think if we set that time aside where there are no screens as distractions, then what happens naturally is the puzzle or the role playing or the playing with the stuffed animals. And it's very hard when we have all these chores and tasks to do to stop and play Monopoly or stop and play the trust fall or walk the dogs or throw the ball with the dogs. But I just always think, what is the purpose of being, if we want to be a perfect parent, I think part of being the perfect parent, which is impossible to do, is probably enjoying the kids, to be in joy with them. Because we always want to bring our kids into the adult world, and you need to do this, and you do this, and you need to get A's, and you need to get B's, and you get the home runs, and you need to do all this. But what if our job is to go into the kids' world and not be childish, but be childlike? They're reminding us of that beauty and wonder that we all have living within inside of us. And we have someone's childhood in our hands. So treating that with such precious intention and not with a lot of pressure. I tell parents all the time, instead of trying to be the perfect parent, let's shoot for B minus, because that means that 80% of the time you have to do it, quote unquote, the right way, or the way that you want to do it. Because most people behind their four walls are doing things different than they're showing outside of their four walls. And I just want them to match. I want them to go to sleep at night and have that peace within their heart that they know they have that connection with that child that no one can get in the way of. It doesn't matter about their grades. It doesn't matter about their sports. It doesn't matter about their behavior. It matters about that connection. And I always use the analogy of if you've ever been at a dinner party and you know that two people, you think they have a crush on each other, you think they're dating, but you're not sure. So you're watching them and you're watching how they interact, but they know they're in a relationship or they're not in a relationship. And it's not even anything they're doing. It's just a feeling. It's like this invisible thread between the two of them. And they are the only two that know that. Let's say dating isn't allowed at work. They're dating and they know they're dating, but they can't show that they're dating, but they feel that connection through that invisible thread. And when you have that with a child and they feel that also, that not only do mom and dad love me, but mom and dad like me. They like me as a human. They like my essence. They like my spirit. They like me as a person. Not for anything I do or don't do, but they like me as at a soul level. Then they drop their walls and they can go out into the world and know that it might be scary and stressful out there, but at home is a safe haven. And that's where they can decompress and let their hair down and just relax and settle into who they are so they can figure it out who they are. And then they go out into the world and show that to everybody else.
That's a great way to look at it. It reminds me of like when you look at your husband and he knows what you want to say. Like you want that kind of connection where
Right.
like they know you more than the stern look.
Exactly. I always tell
that's
parents, I'm like, the way that you treat your niece and nephew, the way that you treat if you've ever babysat, or if you've ever been a teacher or a counselor or a grandparent, or if you've had a neighbor kid over, or been a coach, like of a soccer team or something, the way that you treated those children is ego-free treatment. So whatever that feeling is, that connection you have with that child, bring that home and give that same gift to your child. I like to see my children as not coming from me, but they're children from God. And so I'm just babysitting God's children and they're on loan to me. And I am just so honored and blessed for this job. And so I show up in the way that I'm almost like the babysitter here versus their behavior meaning something about me or their sports or their grades. It's like they are their own throbbing spirit. That's what Dr. Shefali says in her book. And they aren't a mini me. And I was so enmeshed and codependent on them to be and do and act a certain way. So I would not only look like a good mom, but I could feel like a good mom. I would tell my husband all the time, I'm like, I feel like I'm getting a report card and their behavior is a reflection of me as a parent. But once I was able to detach those two things, I'm like, oh, I'm not teaching them how to manage their emotions. I'm not teaching them how to co-regulate. When they would get upset, I would get upset. So we're like two upset people. And it was like leading to madness. And then I was literally blaming a 3-year-old. I'm like, I wouldn't have to act this way if you didn't do X, Y, Z. I'm pretty much blaming a 3-year-old for my 40-year-old behavior. And when we say that out loud, it's crazy making. But I was doing that because my ego was so strong and I was so afraid of messing it up. So every time they would cry about something little, that I would freak out because how can you be freaking out because I didn't peel the banana wrong, or I gave you the wrong sippy cup color, or XYZ? But I was never teaching them how to handle disappointment, how to handle sadness, or in their world, the banana being peeled wrong is akin to us, our boss blowing us off or overlooking us for a promotion. It's just a smaller version of that emotion, and we just deal with it as an adult. And so we need to teach that to them during calm waters, not during the hot moments, but during the calm waters. So it doesn't go from 0 to 100 like you're seeing at schools. And sometimes they show it with sadness and just excessive tears. And sometimes they show it with excessive madness and throwing the chairs and spitting and freaking out and punching walls. Kids they have that emotion going through their body and they have to get it out. So they don't know how to do it. So they either do it through tears, which is a very healthy way of doing it, or they do it through throwing things and being aggressive. And it's just their way of saying, I don't know what to do with this emotion. I need help. And the problem that is happening, you're talking about generational, is we were never taught how to manage our emotions. We were just taught, go to your room, go to timeout, stop it, go get a snack, whatever. We were taught emotional eating. You're upset, just give them a breadstick. So then we grow up and then we never learn these skills. And now all of a sudden we have to teach it. It's like me trying to teach my kids how to speak Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. So I can't teach them how to speak Spanish, but I can learn it as an adult, even though it's very broken Spanish. And I can try my best to teach it to them. And that's what I tell parents all the time. Don't beat yourself up because you were never taught it yourself. So you're like trying to teach them a second language that you were never taught yourself. But a lot of times they have that niggling feeling in their heart. This doesn't feel right. I know this is the way that I was treated, but this doesn't feel right. I think there's other resources out there. So there's all that you offer. There's the podcast. There's books out there. And when you find that one book, it's like eureka moment. It's, oh my goodness, everything will click. And then you'll try it. And you're like, that didn't work. I'll try this. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, that worked. It worked a little bit. And it's always that trial and error. And you let the kids know. And I tell my kids all the time, I've never parented a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old. I know you think you came into this life and I was like this, but I'm learning with you and we're growing together versus I'm in charge. I know all the things. Let's figure this out together. And then it's more of a teamwork versus this domineering approach where it's just I'm the boss and do it because I said. And some kids that works for, but then you have a completely passive child. And some kids, they buck the system and they just push back. So we don't want either of those. So I just always tell parents, drop the rope. There's no tug of war. You're in relationship with them. You're not above them, so to speak. You're learning together.
Yeah, that's true. That's great. And the more you communicate with your kids, the better it is. It's just like us. When we know the why, we're more apt to do the right thing.
Exactly.
And cooperate. And so are they. So listen, I know that I'm keeping you long. If you're up for it, I have a few like rapid fire questions that are real quick.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go through them. Let's see. I'm going to pick just a few the good ones because I probably have way too many. Let's see. They're all good. No. Okay. So we didn't talk about mindfulness, or maybe you did. Maybe you mentioned it once. But mindfulness is part of all good parenting, I think. Do you talk a lot about that in conscious parenting? Things like breathing and I don't know what else you use. Do you actually do that? Or do you think that is that a yes or no?
That's a very hard, strong yes, because I always teach parents that the whole reading strategies things I was teaching you, how we teach them chunk it. I tell parents, throw all the strategies at them and see what they resonate with. When they're real little, you want to do a lot of role playing and you want to see what they gravitate towards. So you can put that in your hip pocket, like, oh, they like to count to 10, or they like to spell their name backwards, or they like to blow out the birthday candles, or they like to make soup where they smell the soup and cool out the soup. And you want to see what they gravitate towards when they're doing it in the role playing, because then that's a way for you to realize like, oh, this is something that's helpful to him or her. A funny story, my kids were at Wendy's and we do this. They were with Wendy's with my dad, and we taught the kids, when you get really upset, you're going to make a bowl of soup. We're going to put funny things in the soup and we're going to smell the soup and we're going to cool it off. And so it was this whole thing. It helps to get them out of that red zone, so to speak. It helps them get to yellow then to green. And so they're always doing it. So we're at Wendy's. They're at Wendy's with my dad. They both go to the same seat. My son gets so mad that he can't have the seat or whatever. It's something silly. They're like 3 and 5. And he's screaming at my dad, I want soup. I want soup. I want soup. What he was telling my dad, who didn't know what to eat, he was like, look at the menu. They have chili. I don't know. What he was saying is, I am so upset and I need help making soup. I need your help. Can you make soup with me? Because I can't calm down on my own. And he was like, I see chili. But what kids need is they need that help. And so we need to teach them as many strategies as we can during calm waters. And they're silly things. When they're little, you want to make it into a game of, like I was talking about, like blowing out the birthday candles, spelling their name backwards, counting to 10, counting backwards from 10. spelling my name, spelling their name. So you give them a choice. Do you want to spell my name backwards or your name backwards? And it helps pull them out of that red zone because they're so caught in their, and they're all over the map. So they can't calm down. So like a lot of times when they're so upset, we like, you need to do this. You're going to lose screens and blah, blah, blah. And we try to lecture. Just pretend they're in a burning building. And our job is to help them get out of that burning building with their calm energy. And once they're out, and sometimes I'll tell my kids, I'm staying calm to help you stay calm. Because when we see them going like this, we don't have to go on the roller coaster with them. We just are that calm, steady Eddie flight attendant energy. And it helps pull that out of it. Then during calm waters, you can be like, hey, what was going on there? What was going on? I was really getting upset because you were so upset. And then it's this whole dialogue. And what could I do during that time when they're older? What could I do during that time? But if they're younger, that's a great opportunity to bring that same experience with the stuffed animals of the sharing of the seat. You don't have to say, remember when you did this? It's like we're doing it through the back door. It's like the side door. We're like, yeah, this little girl is upset because they told us seat. What should we do? And then you have one of them freaking out and the other one's not. So that's so powerful to teach kids during calm waters. So then they have strategies of what to do during the rough waters.
Very powerful. And I am 100% on board, not only on board, but I'm proof that the soup works.
Yeah, it does.
It works really well. They remember it to this day. And like the oldest one he's almost 10 and he remembers what it is.
Yeah. And some kids, I'll just say,
definitely
some kids, they don't want interaction. They want to be left alone. And if you say like, how can make soup? It adds flames to the fire of the burning building. So sometimes you can just say, do you need help calming down or you want to calm down by yourself? It's not sending them to timeout, go to your room until you, I'm here if you need me, but you might need to go in your room and calm down or go hug a stuffed animal or go punch a pillow. So I don't say go to your room. I'm like, do you need help calming down or you want to calm down by yourself? So the goal is calming down. But if you need me, great. If not, and then a lot of times the ones that want to be left alone because they just need to process it on their own, then they go to the room and they cry in the pillow or whatever. And then they come out and you're like, okay, what was going on there? And this is what was going on for me. What was going on for you? Whether it's a misunderstanding, they're mad at a teacher. A lot of times we're the dog to kick. They're so stressed out at school and they're being hit from all these different angles. So they come home and you're like, hey, you want some blueberries? And they flip out because they wanted the raspberries. And you're like, what in the world? So then we're like, what's up with that? And we start to get into it with them. And we realize we're just the dog to kick because they can't kick their teacher and they can't show all that emotion. So they're holding it in. And that's why in the car, sometimes it comes out and it's, hey, you looks like you had a hard day because we know that it's never about the raspberries. And so when you know it's never about the raspberries, then you're not rattled and they're being so disrespectful. It's like when they calm down, you're like, what was going on with those raspberries? And then they're like, oh my gosh, today my teacher called me out because I didn't do that and embarrassed me so much. And I'm like, oh, so you're displacing some of that frustration. I do that all the time too. I get that. Next time, just let me know that your teacher did that before so we can avoid all this. So it's done in a very light and fluffy way. Because I think conscious parenting sometimes gets a bad rap of you're a doormat parent and I'm just calm and gentle at all times. And you can have popsicles at 11 because your throbbing spirit says it should. And it's not like that. It's a very strong, sturdy parenting, I like to call it, versus this gentle, I'm this meek mouse. And because a lot of times parents will say they're crazy, so I have to act crazy to match their energy. And I tell them the exact opposite. The calmer you are, the more you're teaching that to them and that also you're a safe place.
Exactly. I can't let you end without asking you this one last rapid because if it's not a rapid, it doesn't have to be. However, I get so much resistance from parents when I tell them this. They all still want to do timeouts. And I give them all the reasons why it doesn't work, right? But I'm like, okay, you know what they need? If they're like me, they need the science behind it. I do that. I like dig into science. I'm a science geek and I dig into it and I give them the facts. And for some parents, they don't care about the science. They just want to know in logical terms. So what do you tell your people to get them to not do timeouts and understand why it doesn't work?
I love this question because timeouts is something I used and I was using and I was like, this isn't working. This isn't working. I just felt like I was on the crazy cycle. And if it's working, then I would have kept doing it. But I just couldn't figure it out. And I finally figured it out. It was like, oh, I get it. Because when we put them in timeout over and over, when they're having a tricky emotion, number one, they learn that I can't share tricky emotions. I get in trouble for having a tricky emotion. If I have the bananas peeled wrong, I cry, go to your room and sit in timeout till you calm down. When look, my daughter was always, I would sit on that rug because I had a little timeout rug. And my goal was to help them calm down. And that it was also to help me calm down too. The timeout was just for as much for me because I was so caught up in my ego. And I just sit in that rug and I knew I was going to get back out and have to cry again because of something else. And it was such a waste of my 3 minutes or whatever. And what she was saying is, you're not teaching me what to do when I do get upset. So it is going to feel like you're constantly sending me to timeout because you're highly sensitive kids. They're empaths and they feel all the emotions and they know if mom and dad like them. They know that if they're welcome, they know if they're getting on people's nerves. And so they're very edgy and very touchy. And so the banana being peeled wrong or the wrong sippy color is going to set them off because they're already like this and they're walking on eggshells. So I just tell parents, I'm like, if you're constantly doing the timeout, it's not working. Start thinking about the adult version of a timeout. Because what happens is they're taught for 18 years that they shouldn't feel tricky emotions. And when they do, they're in trouble and they need to go away from you. They need to leave you alone and exit stage left. So when they're a teenager and they're upset, guess what they're going to do? They're going to put themselves into a physical timeout. They're going to put on the hoodie, go to their room, put on the headphones, and they're going to put themselves in a timeout because that's what they've been taught for 15, 12, 13 years, that I should go away when I'm having a tricky emotion. So they are going to stop sharing the tricky emotions. They're going to internalize it, and then they're going to go to their room and put themselves in a timeout. And then when they're a grown up, they're going to do the adult version of a timeout, which we all do at some level, where we're going to eat our feelings away. We're going to sleep our feelings away, or drink our feelings, or vape our feelings, or smoke our feelings, because we've never been taught that tricky emotions are part of the human experience. We've never taught strategies that go for a run, deep breaths, meditation. Even a power nap does help, not sleeping it away, but just to check out, shut off social media, read a book, listen to inspiring music. Like, we've never been taught those things. So when they're a grown up and they have these tricky emotions, they're not going to use any of those strategies because they've never been taught them. It doesn't feel natural. They're just going to put themselves in an adult timeout, however that will look like to them, but they're going to buffer and they're going to stuff their feelings because they've been taught for 18 to 25 years that negative, tricky emotions should never be felt. And when they have, and when they do, something has gone wrong. So now I'm going to exit stage left, whether it's the relationship, or I'm going to check out of this situation, or this marriage, or this job, or this promotion I didn't get. And I'm going to go numb my feelings because this is too much for me. So the kid version of a timeout is just going to be experienced as a teen and a young adult, and an adult in an adult timeout, which we don't want, because then it just breaks that connection. So I always think of, and I tell parents, during the calm waters, you want to tell them what to do. Sorry, my dogs. What to do with those tricky emotions. So then when it does happen, they know what to do. And most important, when they're not with you, they know what to do. So when they strike out, or they get an F, or they don't get picked for the lacrosse team, whatever, that disappointment, are they going to freak out, or are they going to know what to do? Oh, this is part of the human experience, because they've felt it so much of their life that it's nothing that's like going to knock them out, so to speak. And that's how you build resiliency in kids.
That's great. Again, you gave me a great reason, because that would scare parents. Sometimes you need to be scared. That would scare a parent to think, okay, as a teenager, you don't want them to pull away and go hibernate like that. And that's what most teenagers do. And that's probably the reason, because this is what they had. So instead of timeout, you just tell them, you're just giving them a choice. Do you want to do this, or do you want to cool off by yourself? Right?
I teach a 4-step process. Sorry, he's eating something. I want to make sure it's not dangerous. And it's first, the 4-step process is, first you have to detach the ego, which is the hardest step of it all. But when you see them as not belonging to you, as you see them as a neighbor's kid, or a niece or a nephew, or a grandchild, or a player on your team, I like to see them as children from God. So I'm just babysitting them. And so I like to see them as having a hard time versus giving me a hard time. So detaching the ego and knowing that it's all coming from fear, it's all coming from lack, it's all coming from our own stuff. Detaching the ego and seeing them as a child, not as your child, and just someone you're babysitting. Right. So detaching the ego is number one. Then number two, you just notice what you're seeing. You seem pretty blank. When they're older, you give them a choice between two sometimes. Depends on the child, depends on if they're in the yellow, which is like just about to flip, or they're in the red where they're full blown. You seem upset. You seem disappointed. Like, using those words based on how old they are. So using words to help them label what they're feeling. When they're younger, you seem sad. You seem mad. You seem angry. And you're saying it in a voice just like this. And you're just noticing what you're seeing. So when my kids are older, I might say, are you feeling disappointed, or are you feeling embarrassed that happened? And so they'll be like, I feel like this happened. And especially when it has nothing to do with us, it's so much easier to do. Then I'll just normalize it for them and just say, I know how that feels, or I felt that way too. Sometimes they want to hear stories of when I was that age and I felt that emotion, or just sometimes they want to hear this week, like, I felt that too when this happened. You're not making about, you're just building that connection. Like, I know how that feels. I've been that way too. Just like you do with a friend over a cup of coffee. Like, oh my gosh, I know how that feels when you feel rejected because I felt rejected here. And then you bring it right back to them. And then if they're the type of kid, and you'll learn this through role playing, if they're the type, or they're those post meltdown talks, you'll learn this also. If they're a type of kid that needs to be left alone, then I'll just say, do you need help calming down, or do you want to calm down by yourself? And then they get to choose. You give them that kind of that authority. They feel so out of control, so you're giving them some of that control back. And then for the kids who need a lot more help, then we practice strategies during calm waters. There's no teaching that goes on during this time. We practice it during calm waters, whether it's the post meltdown talk or through the role playing when they're younger. And then so you might give them a choice. Do you want to make soup, or do you want to spell your name backwards? And so that just gives them the time, like, I feel some more authority. And then you do the breathing, or you do whatever the strategy is. And I have a whole list of strategies of things to teach during calm waters. And you can even ask the kids during calm waters, like, what is something that helps you? Not an open-ended question like that, but between these choices, I have a list of 20 things. And they answer, this would always help me, this would never help me, or this would sometimes help me. And then they just check the box. So you have that material of what they are going to gravitate towards during tricky emotions. So then you have stuff in your arsenal versus, I don't know what to do when you're freaking out that they're freaking out. It's so much more empowering, and you get to enjoy your children. And like I said earlier, the meltdowns, I'll just call them, or the tricky emotions, they happen less frequently, less intensity, and less duration. But the goal is to never make them go away completely. And you're just not scared about them. I used to be so freaked out when my kids would be upset. But now I'm just like, oh, of course they're upset. They're a child having a human experience. I'm 48. I feel most emotions most days. And so then it's just like,
Exactly.
the kids that are so like afraid of being in trouble, like the ones that want to be perfectionists, they're so afraid. And so they're holding that beach ball underneath water, that tension of just, I can't be upset. I can't be upset. I can't be upset. And that's what I was doing to my kids. And they were nervous wrecks. And so when they would get upset, I would get upset. And then my husband would get upset that I'm upset. It was like this whole thing because they were so afraid, and they were holding that beach ball underneath water versus like, you can get upset here. Now you're going to have a consequence if you hit your brother. And but feeling emotion, yes, let's just channel that. Let's just teach you what to do with that emotion versus just you're always going to be in trouble.
Exactly. I know that it's late, and I know that you have to go. If you want to tell everyone where they can find you.
So my whole goal is to help parents have more harmony in their home. So I have a podcast called Harmony in the Home. You can find me on any of the places, Instagram, Facebook, or on the podcast. And what I have done over the years is I get so many of the same questions over and over and over. So I put it into a 30-day boot camp. And I say boot camp just because it's a fun name, but it's not hard. It's not child focused. It's more parent focused on what you can do. Because I remember thinking, wait, if I'm the problem, then that means I'm also the solution. It was so empowering to find this work because I spent 5 years trying to change my kids. And then I just changed my side of the street and stayed in my lane. And it was so much more empowering. And I saw that reflected back to me so much more of my kids over time. So I took the best strategies and what so many parents asked me, and I put it in 30 days. Every day you get a new lesson. You get a new kind of question to think about and to ponder. I talk about love languages. I talk about consequences. I talk about what to do when your kids are getting upset. I talk about how to not yell and how to not live with mommy guilt or daddy guilt. And so it's 30 days. It's self-paced. You can do it in 60 days if you wanted to, if it feels too overwhelming. And it's just a great place for you to be conscious of how you're showing up. Because when we fix and change and alter the way we're showing up, not that we're doing it wrong, but we just show up with more intention and more consciousness, then we realize that it's reflected back to us with our kids and their behavior, and just their overall vibe just chills out once we chill out.
And your boot camp is on Facebook, right?
Self-paced.
Thank you so much, Kelly. This has definitely been lots and lots of value for everybody. And yeah, if everybody wants to know more about how to make soup or anything else, then they need to go and dig you out. We will link to Kelly in the show note as well. Thank you again so much.
That's it, folks. Thanks for joining us on Family, Business, and Beyond. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. Your support helps us reach more people and make a bigger impact. Remember to follow us on social media for more tips, insights, and behind-the-scenes content. And don't forget to check out our online courses and webinars to continue your journey of empowerment and growth. Stay inspired, cast aside the doubt, let your dreams shout. Until next time, keep embracing the joy within and pursuing your passions. This is Debra Kane, signing off.